What's going on, GP Football Fanatics fans? It's your boy JP Football Fanatics back with you once again with the Week 2 recap. So, for those of you who were supposed to tune into the live stream, I apologize. I don't really quite understand what exactly happened during that time. I don't know if it was because of something that was a default somewhere in my computer or whatever the case may be. Don't know why it's not live streaming for me. Hopefully that will get figured out for tomorrow night when I do my week 3 picks. So hopefully I don't run into that issue tomorrow. So for tonight we'll do this. We'll do a pre-recorded podcast of week 2, my week 2 recap, and then hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to do the live stream of the other thing for the week 3 picks. So thank you for everybody tuning in. It always means a lot for any time that anybody does come onto my channel and be able to explore and see all the different things that I have posted on here. Before we do get started, though, please be sure to drop a like on this video if you have not done so already. And be sure to also hit that subscribe button to help the channel grow to be bigger and better than what it is already. And be sure to also hit the notification bell for any time that I post new NFL content on here, that you guys will be the first ones to be notified as far as when I go live or I upload videos like this one, for example, onto my YouTube page. So like, comment, subscribe, do all those glorious things, help the channel grow to be bigger and better than what it is already. And like I said, thank you again for everybody that tunes into all of my stuff throughout the week and everything. Really does mean a lot. So we'll get started. We're going to talk about week 2. Obviously, week 2 ended last night with the Steelers and Browns game. We'll talk about that one a little bit. Just so kind of similar to what I did last week, I didn't really go into the specifics of every game of last week. I kind of briefly mentioned some of them because I didn't really have that much time to be able to watch all of the highlights, so I don't have opinions on every single game, although I will mention them briefly here and there, talk about them a little bit, thinking like, talking about what I think about this team and where they're headed and stuff like that. But I won't, for some of them, I'm going to try not to um, go into like a full blown explanation on each and every game just because of time constraints. And also, I just want to be able to talk about some of the more important games that kind of happened throughout the week, the more interesting games. So we'll go ahead, we'll get started with the week 2 recap. And I will tell you, this was quite an interesting week for anybody that's a football fanatic. I thought it was a really cool, interesting week. I thought it was actually a little bit more interesting than week 1, believe it or not. And week 1 is usually very hard to try and pick apart with each team and where they are and everything. So week 2, you kind of have like a feel of like where they could be, but at the same time, they could be full of surprises too. So there were a couple surprises that happened this week, and we'll talk about one of them. And this in particular, which we'll talk more in depth on when we get to that point, will be the Patriots and Dolphins game that was on Sunday Night Football this past Sunday, which was a interesting game that was very similar to what we saw last Sunday with the Patriots and the Eagles. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first game. So first game is Thursday Night Football, the Eagles versus the Vikings. Now, we know how the Eagles are. We know that they're one of the top teams in the NFL and even in the NFC as well. So they're probably at least the top 3, so to speak. Whereas the Vikings are taking that slight step back this year defensively, which they haven't played very good defense at all yet this season. So this was a Thursday night game. Kind of watched a little bit of it, but I watched more of highlights on the game. I kind of kept more in close contact with players that I had playing in this game. So this game wasn't really exactly a pretty game to watch. And for anybody that watched it on Thursday night, I feel so sorry for you. Even to Eagles fans too. Like, I know they scored 34 points against a Vikings defense that is very lacking, but the Eagles are continuing to show their sluggishness. And we saw that in week 1 when they played the Patriots. They didn't play exactly their A game on offense in that game. And they exactly didn't really play that in week 2 too, despite scoring 34 points on the Vikings, which really isn't much of a shock right there. But a lot of turnovers in that first quarter. Jalen Hurts throwing that interception to the Vikings player, and then and everybody fumbling on the Vikings on every possession that they've had in order to keep themselves like alive into the game. So neither team I felt really played very well in this game, especially a very strong Eagles team that is supposed to be good in every aspect of every which way. They continue to kind of show their signs of like sluggishness, and I kind of figured they were going to, take some slight steps back in terms of things that they excelled in last year, and then they lost a couple of key pieces in that team and that roster, and they're continuing they're kind of showing where their flaws are now versus what they were last year. So, um, this game wasn't exactly the prettiest. I will admit that for sure. I didn't quite thought it was like a very exciting game by any chance. I know the Vikings kind of found a way to fight their way back into the game, and Kirk Cousins kind of doing what Kirk Cousins does, turning the ball over, fumbling on one of their biggest possessions that could have kept them in the game. And Justin Jefferson fumbling as well, and Alexander Madison. So like so many fumbles happened from the Vikings offense that kept them from winning this game right here. If those fumbles didn't happen, especially if Justin Jefferson did not fumble that ball in the end zone, this would have been a completely different game, and the Vikings probably could have won this game easily. So their offense isn't the problem; it's their defense that is very bad against every which way. They're not very good in pass rush. They're not good in covering receivers. They're not very good in stopping the run. There was just a lot of factors in the Vikings defense that has a lot of work to clean up throughout the season, which I think is going to be a pretty long season for the Vikings. Like I was hoping they would have kind of showed everybody wrong and say that they are the team to beat, but I just haven't seen it personally yet. When you lose to Tampa Bay and then you lose to Philly the way that you did, shows me that there's a lot of concerns about the Vikings. And as far as the Eagles go, they also show concerns too. Their schedule is a bit stronger than it was last year, so they'll have to play the Cowboys twice. They have to play they already played the Patriots, but they would have to play the Cowboys twice. They have to play the Commanders twice, the Giants. They'll have to play the Bills, the Jets. Who else am I missing? The Dolphins. So a lot of teams that they're going to have to face throughout this year. They're going to be facing better quarterbacks this year than what they did a year ago. So I expect this team to kind of take that step back this year and lose a couple more games than what they did last year. So right now, I'm not very impressed with either one of these two teams right now. I thought this game was kind of a waste of time. And if you're paying Amazon Prime to watch this particular game, I apologize for all of you. But hopefully this Thursday night, which I don't think is going to be any better with the Niners and the Giants, hopefully in the future, throughout this season, these Thursday night games will get better, and hopefully you won't have to watch something like this ever again. So let's talk about the 0-2 Bengals. Now the Bengals started out 0-2 last year, so very slow start for the Bengals, like it was a year ago. They lost to the Steelers to Mitchell Trubisky. That wasn't a very good game. Joe Burrow threw 4 interceptions in that game. And then the week after, they played Cooper Rush and the Cowboys without Dak Prescott, and they lost that game as well. So this year, they got absolutely smoked by the Browns. And then this week, they got beat by the Ravens by only a field goal, which the Ravens probably could have beaten them a lot more. But the offense for the Bengals started to come alive, and their defense was making the big stops when they needed to. So, Joe Burrow, as far as his injury goes, his calf injury, that really is very obvious that it is a problem right now. So, Joe Burrow not playing to full health mode, an offensive line that has not proven anything yet, and a ground game that's very lacking, very inconsistent with Joe Mixon. I wouldn't be too shocked if the Bengals kind of fell apart this year and didn't, win as many games as they did last year because of that offensive line and because of these injuries. Joe Burrow's a calf injury. So I wouldn't be exactly shocked if they did fall apart if Joe Burrow misses some time, which could be a possibility. He is questionable for this week. They will play the Rams, and that won't be an easy game for them as the Rams have been playing pretty good football lately. Not going to lie there. But yeah, they're off to a very slow start. Not the prettiest game of all against Baltimore, which we kind of expected. It wasn't going to be very pretty, but I digress. We'll see where their season goes. I really do hope that their season does turn around and Burrow will get back into the winning mentality and have his contract worth something. As far as the Ravens go, their offense continues to show, that they are a very electrifying offense when everybody is healthy. So losing J.K. Dobbins for the season definitely hurts. Um, Lamar Jackson played another phenomenal game against the Bengals as he usually does. A couple of times, they've given him some problems. I know the Cincinnati defense has been consistent the last couple of years when they've played Baltimore and keeping them in the game, which has never really happened much when Andy Dalton was the quarterback here for Cincinnati. Lamar Jackson is playing some pretty good football right now. I think he's playing one of his better football than he has the last couple of seasons, and I think has a lot to do with the offensive line that's growing, a running game that is better, more receivers. Although he is going to probably be missing Odell Beckham Jr., it was nice for him to have Mark Andrews back into that lineup. Save Flowers, who's been very good this rookie season so far, who's had a nice start. And, there are some questions about the Ravens. I think a lot of it does come to their defense. I know there's a lot of good veteran players that are on that defense, but I think as far as like the consistency of pass rushing is a bit of a question because they allowed Joe Burrow and company to come all the way back and score 24 points on them when they were up by like a pretty big lead for most of the game, maybe like a 10-point lead for most of the game. But regardless of that, the Ravens have been playing some pretty good football. I think they can. I think if things kind of work out into their favor, and if Cincinnati kind of loses track of things, if the Cleveland Browns lose, them losing Nick Chubb for the year probably, and if Deshaun Watson's playing like he's been playing, the Ravens have a pretty good shot of winning the AFC North. But things can definitely happen at any time. I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens were a favorite right now, or at least in the talk to go to the playoffs as the AFC North champions. I just wouldn't be surprised about that. So, two playoff teams from a year ago battling it out. It's a long season. 0-2 Bengals, 1-1 Ravens. It's going to be a long season, so we'll see where everything goes. Next game I want to talk about was probably one of the biggest thrillers of the week, and that was the overtime win against the Detroit Lions with the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seahawks, after coming off of a very bad loss last week to the Los Angeles Rams, they came back and bounced back against Detroit, and they were able to win in overtime. Now, this was kind of the game that I've kind of followed most of in terms of like watching this game and everything because I took the time. I watched the game on NFL Red Zone. Yes, I do watch that quite often. I really do enjoy it with 7 hours of commercial-free football. And this particular game was probably one of the biggest wins of the week. I thought this was probably the best game of the week, personally. I thought both quarterbacks, Geno Smith and Jared Goff, both played really good games, especially Geno Smith, coming off of a loss to the Rams from last week. I thought had a big bounce-back game and a big statement win against the Lions team that is poised to have a pretty nice season and be the NFC North champions this year. So, some crucial plays as far as the Seahawks go. Like, obviously, their offense has not really been a huge problem, but what we saw from last week, they gave up 30 points to the Rams, and now this week they gave up 31 to the Lions. So their defense is very much in question of how they're going to improve during the season, which I don't think they're going to really do a whole lot to ramp up on the defense. I think their defense is probably at least in the bottom 5 right now as we speak right now. Their run defense, teams can still run on them like they were last year, although it did improve towards the end of the year. Teams can still pass on them, like Jared Goff was dicing up the secondary players. So a lot of big questions about this defense and the pass rush and the run defense. Like, they have a lot of questions in terms of how they're going to be as a whole this year. So I still think they're going to win some games because I think their offense is going to really prevail and win them a lot of these shootout games. But but their defense needs to step up in big moments too when they need to. So I thought the big moment that they really did step up in was when Jared Goff threw his first interception in like I think it was like 6 or 7 games it was, dating back to last year, and throwing that pick six for the Seahawks that put them right back into this game, which was something that the Seahawks desperately needed. And that was what some would say a Detroit moment right there of something that would happen. So, um, both teams I thought played very well. Both offenses are teams that I think both offenses I think can compete with a lot of different teams in the NFC, like the 49ers, I think they could, or the Eagles and teams like that. The Cowboys probably their best pass rush right now, and that's tough. But it was a good win for the Seahawks and Geno Smith and Pete Carroll and everybody. I thought they played a phenomenal game in this game with a couple mistakes that they've had to correct during the second half of the game. But regardless, though, it was a nice win for Geno Smith. It was a nice bounce back win that they desperately needed, and we'll see what they do next week against Carolina, which I think they should be able to win that game, fairly handily. And with the Lions playing the Falcons, that could be a very interesting game too, and how they're going to stop Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier in the running game, because that's where the Falcons excel in, and that's where the Lions usually struggle on defense, is being able to stop the run. So both teams have exciting games coming up next week that will be good matchups for them, and we'll see what they're like going into next week. So this game right here, the Colts and the Texans. The Colts won this one 31-20. Anthony Richardson uh, played for like a quarter and a half, maybe, or like maybe 3 quarters. I don't really know exactly. Not probably not even 3 quarters, maybe like a quarter and a half, maybe. I don't really know. But regardless, though, I mean, Anthony Richardson came out of the game. Gardner Minshew came in, and I thought Gardner Minshew, based off of the highlights and the NFL Red Zone of what they were showing during this game, they didn't really show a whole lot of this game. But you can definitely tell both these teams have their flaws, no question about it. I thought Gardner Minshew played a pretty good game for the Colts, especially finding ways to score on the offense and keeping the pass consistent, which was a big question for them this year. They're still doing all right. They're doing well on offense without Jonathan Taylor, which is a bit of a shocker. We didn't know if that was going to be a thing. But their defense has a lot of holes. And the Texans also, while they have a lot of veteran players playing on this team, they also have a lot of questions on their offense too, and that's why they can't score enough points when they do play in like these kind of games. Like this was one of the games. This is one of their more winnable games that the Texans are going to have this year. So as far as like this game goes, not a whole lot to really say about it, but just kind of worth mentioning is in terms of like two of the worst teams in the NFL. Um, kind of battling it out. It's nice for at least one of them to win this game, but nothing to really write home about either one of these teams. And I don't really expect either one of them to really do a whole lot going into this year. With the games that they play and such. So that's all I really want to say about that one. Before I get into the next game, I'm going to take a sip of my water real quick, so that way my voice is still talkative enough. Okay. All right, guys. So the next game here this was probably one of the sluggish games that of the whole weekend. And was this really much of a shocker? Well, we'll kind of talk about it though. So a shocking low scoring game against with Jacksonville and Kansas City. So um, Chris Jones came back and played in this game, and Travis Kelsey also came back from his injury. So that definitely does make a significant difference in how the Chiefs play when you have two of one of your top players in on your team. Chris Jones as a defensive end, puts a lot more pressure on offenses, and they did all day long against Trevor Lawrence in this offense. Like, guys, like the pass rush was so good in this game. Like Trevor Lawrence couldn't really do anything with the football. Like they couldn't cash in like big moments. For example, Zay Jones came in, had almost at least 2 touchdowns in this game, and neither one of them were close to being in bounds. And then there was one to like Calvin Ridley that also was kind of close there too at the edge, but couldn't put both of his feet in bounds either, and kind of ran out of bounds in some ways. So the Jacksonville offense definitely struggled in this game to be able to score anything. And, for them to be able to come out with a loss of 17-9 and keeping Kansas City to 17 points is quite impressive. But however, you also got to look on the flip coin of it. The Chiefs offense is also not as good as people would like to think they are. We saw this last week against when they played Detroit. They missed Travis Kelsey desperately, and they couldn't even score more than 20 points in that entire game right there. Without Travis Kelsey, and the receiving core was also just not very good either, and they're still not very good. Sky Moore, an okay receiver. He's probably not my favorite receiver, but maybe he could do something throughout the year to kind of keep that separation between him and Kelsey. Kadarius Toney had a better game, but not a much better game than he did last week. I thought was the worst game we've ever seen Kadarius Toney play. I don't think Kadarius Toney is a receiver. I think you have to utilize him as a Debo Samuel format, where you can give him the ball to kind of rush with and kind of do some of those like RPO plays with and everything like that. Because you're not going to be able to get anything out of him if you throw the deep ball down to him, which we know he's not very good at doing at all. So the Chiefs are definitely, excuse me, it's in terms of like offensively, they have a lot of question marks, and we know that their offense is just not anywhere as good as they could be. So if Patrick Mahomes was not playing in this offense, they probably would be almost close to the worst offense in the league. The offensive line is still pretty strong, considering that they did give up a couple of sacks against the Jacksonville defense and Josh Allen and the company and all that. But 17 points, man. I mean, you can't win Super Bowls and win playoff games with only scoring 17 points against Jacksonville that's still trying to identify themselves. So this was not a shocking game to me in terms of like I kind of figured that Kansas City was going to beat them in some way, but I don't think I would have expected it to be as low scoring of a game as it was between these two teams. So there's a lot of glaring holes that are very obvious between both teams, and one of them is that nobody can step up to wide receiver one if you're the Chiefs, and the offensive line for the Jaguars cannot protect Trevor Lawrence, and they can't still find a consistent rhythm on offense. So that's concerning to me. Like if you're wanting to win Super Bowls, you want to go to the playoffs, everything of that nature, you have to be able to compete with the big dogs. And Kansas City was their first test. Now, two of their other games that they're going to be playing later on this year, or three games of that matter, or more, depends. I don't know exactly what their schedule is, but you gotta be able to go in and beat Buffalo, which is a very decent possibility. Cincinnati, and you got to play Baltimore. You got to play Cleveland. You got to play Pittsburgh. So some of those winnable games are probably more so Buffalo and Pittsburgh. I think those are games that Jacksonville can win, but not a guarantee win there for that matter. So if they can't win like these big time games, and if they can't beat like the premier teams like the Chiefs or of that nature, then they're not going to be able to go to the playoffs and be that dark horse that everybody is talking about. So they have to get themselves consistent. They have to get themselves better. And the Chiefs offense has to find something else for them to work on besides giving the ball to Travis Kelsey all the time, passing it to him, because there has to be more. There has to be someone out there that is quietly good that needs to step up to the plate on the offense. So next game is the Bucks and the Bears. So the Bucks, I have to say, a team that was not projected to do much this year, have been playing pretty well. And believe it or not, Baker Mayfield has been playing some of his best football of his career so far. I am not going to lie about that either. I feel like, when he's played with the Bucks and the way that he's been executing himself and throwing like those deep passes, I think he's got a lot of help around him. I think the Bucks offense, like, yeah, I know Tom Brady retired. That was a huge loss for them. But when you look on the flip coin of things, though, too, you still have a good wide receiving core and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin that are there to help you. You have Rashad White, which I think their run game is probably slightly better than what it was last year, but I don't think it's nearly as good as it should be. An offensive line that's pretty good, some good tight ends, and then you have a rock solid defense with Tristan Wirfs is still there too, and Levante David. Like you still have a rock solid defense as well that can help you win in these games. And their defense, as expected, they were going into play against Chicago. They know Chicago's got so many different problems, and Justin Fields still stinks. That's the moral of the story is that Justin Fields is not the guy that everybody wants to praise about or, glorify on in terms of his quarterbacking. And he has not been able to prove that he can win games like this or tight games like this. So he had plenty of opportunities to win this game for the Bears, but he blew it on turnovers. He blew it on the fumble, the interception, taking sack after sack, and he just was not in sync at all with any of the receivers. And, that whole idea of him getting DJ Moore to help him out in that wide receiver one role has not really panned out yet to be anything. Run game, they hardly ever use the run game, but I feel like they could be good with that with Khalil Herbert. Offensive line that's still trash. A defense that lacks so much in every department, in every which way. That's why they lose these games and they give up so many big plays. So the Bears got a lot of problems. They're a dysfunctional mess right now that needs to be cleaned up. I didn't have the highest expectations for Justin Field. Maybe they could have been a bit more competitive. I thought they were going to be a slight bit more competitive than what they were last year, but I wasn't expecting them to be like a playoff team. I wasn't expecting them to do all that. So I know it's only the end of week 2. We're only going into week 3 on Thursday night and all of that sort of thing. But, when you're thinking about the Bears and Justin Fields in year 3, like he hasn't really developed to be like a good passing quarterback yet. Like there's just nothing that we've seen yet. He's played against Green Bay and he lost that control of that game. And then he lost control of against Tampa Bay, which he was a lot closer in and had every opportunity to win the game. So, the Bears have to really reconsider as far as like, was it really worth giving up DJ Moore, who he can't even develop Justin Fields in any way yet. You have to think about that kind of thing too. So I don't know. I mean, I think Justin Fields has a lot of things to work on. I think he's a tremendous athlete for that matter, but as far as quarterbacking goes, he's just not the guy that I would want to have throwing the ball for my team. I just would not want that. So good possibilities that could be changing in Chicago after year 3. We'll see where it goes, but after losing 2 games in a row where you're kind of in the middle of things and you could get yourself somewhere and you haven't yet, those are problems that they have to really look in as the season progresses. So, but the Bucks 2-0 right now. They're kind of surprising the league with winning 2 games in a row. Not overly challenging games for either one of them. Vikings defense, we already know how that was. We already talked about that. And then you're talking about the Bears now too. Like, 2-0, we're not going to be, praising them or anything like that, but they could be a lot better than what people have been saying all off season about them. So let's move on to the next game, the Falcons and the Packers. So the Falcons game, for once the Falcons did not blow a lead at the end. That is quite of a surprise. Defense played excellent in the second half, and they came all the way back to beat the Packers. And who would have ever thought that a team like the Atlanta Falcons would have came back after the way that Jordan Love and that offense performed for Green Bay that whole entire game? Who would have ever thought that Atlanta would have came all the way back to beat them in dramatic fashion the way that they did? Like that's just unbelievable and unheard of to really think about. If this was an Aaron Rodgers team that lost, this game after leading by a couple of touchdowns, this would have been that I don't think that would have ever really happened. I don't think in Aaron Rodgers days, I just don't think that something like that would have ever happened. So, good for the Falcons. Desmond Ritter is still not a very good quarterback. So, bad news right there. Drake London had a better game. Kyle Pitts still continues to, crap the bed in some ways and still is not able to take this team out to where they need to be. And, they can only really rely on their run game. Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, their consistent run game has been incredible. And that's why they're 2-0 is because of their run game and their defense that's been playing excellent. So, um, you know, a team that I think is likely to probably win the division in the NFC South. I don't know. I think the Saints are still kind of a little bit ahead of them, but probably not by a whole lot. But you never know. I think this team could turn things around. They could be better. But it's only 2 weeks, and I have to really sit down and actually analyze and watch a full game of this team before I can really say that they are a playoff team. Next game, the Bills and the Raiders. So the Bills offense is Buffalo's offense back. Well, they scored 38 points against the Raiders, a very bad Raiders defense. So they're back in terms of playing bad teams, and they're good in terms of playing bad defenses, and they can score a lot of points. But as far as like their offense and consistency goes, that's kind of a bit of a question mark for me. We haven't seen enough of the Bills yet to really say that they are a winning mentality team and they're a Super Bowl contender, because of how they played against the Jets and Zach Wilson, and then how they played against the Raiders in Week 2, which they did dominate, and their defense dominated too. But let's also talk about the Raiders, though, too. The Raiders' offense struggled in this game. Jimmy Garoppolo didn't play very well. He threw 2 picks and threw for a touchdown pass. No Jacoby Myers. That probably hurt them quite a bit because I thought Jacoby Myers played very well against the Broncos in Week 1. And Josh Jacobs had 9 carries for only -2 yards. um, that's pretty historically bad. I don't think I've ever heard about any running back, as long as I've been watching football, have the ball 9 times and only rushing for -2 yards. He was effective in the passing game in some parts of the field, but if you can't get a consistent run game going, there's an issue right there. There is absolutely an issue happening right there if you can't get a good run offense happening in a game. That's just that's mind blowing to me, and I think that's very concerning. Especially because he was pretty much almost the leading rusher for this team for last year. You would have thought that they would have been able to at least keep themselves, in the game with their run game because they know how successful they could be. And so I don't know. I have my questions about Josh Jacobs. I don't know if it's so much him that I have questions on, or if it's more the fact that the Raiders play calling and their offensive line isn't opening up big holes at the right moments when a run game needs to happen. This is my opinion, but Jimmy Garoppolo didn't play very well in this game, and I think that's kind of expected because we know how good the Bills defense does, and like that nickel back blitz formation. If they can get pressure on you, they can force you to make mistakes. They still have all of their pieces besides Vaughn Miller for now, unless if any big injuries happen, which could very well happen because some of their players are injury prone on defense. In terms of that, that it really didn't shock me that much that the Bills blew out the Raiders, but I also feel that the game probably would have been a lot closer if they had a run game going. And if the defense didn't give up so many big plays to Josh Allen and him throwing the ball down the field to, Gabe Davis or Stephon Diggs and all those different players. So I don't want to say the Bills offense is necessarily back yet. I think there's still a lot of football left to really decide whether or not they're back, and we have to really analyze and see, can they beat like good teams? Like they've already lost to the Jets with Zach Wilson. We know how that goes. But it's a long season ahead of us. Like they got to go in there and they got to beat Kansas City. They got to go in there and beat Jacksonville, Cincinnati. Who else are they playing that's tough? The Eagles, the Cowboys. There's big games that they have to go in there and they have to win some of these big games. They can't blow it in the end, and their defense can't sell on them. That's just the way of how the cookie crumbles. So, but yeah, that's basically what that game was. Really, there was a blowout. Not much to really say about it, except just don't overhype the Bills yet until they can beat a really, really, really good team that's close to their caliber or above them by a mile. So let me take a sip of my water real quick, and then we'll go into this next game here. Whew. It's tough. It's tough sometimes talking this much. All right, next game here. We got the Chargers and the Titans. So Um, the Titans came out and they won this game. It was 27-24. They won this game in overtime. So this gives the Chargers two consecutive losses in a row. So for a team, I actually looked it up this morning. I saw it somewhere on Facebook this morning when I was looking at all the different scores and the different players and everything like that. So, um, in terms of how this game has gone, the Chargers have scored 58 points. Justin Herbert has been playing phenomenal. There's, I can't say Justin Herbert is the reason why the Chargers continue to lose, because when you take a look at his stat line, in this particular game, which I will look up for you right now, he's been playing awesome football lately. Like Justin Herbert, you know, despite losing these two games and being 0-2 is absolutely crazy to me. So in this particular game, I'm gonna look up the stats to it real quick, so that way it just kind of can understand know what I'm talking about and kind of tell you exactly how well he played in this game. So Justin Herbert came into this game, coming off of a nice big performance against the Dolphins, but the defense sells at the end. So Justin Herbert threw, he was 27 for 41 with 305 yards and two touchdowns. And both of those touchdowns that he threw to were to none other than Keenan Allen, who has been having a pretty nice start for the Chargers offense this year. So he threw the ball to Keenan Allen 8 times for 111 yards and two touchdowns, whereas Mike Williams was the second receiver. That's his wide receiver number two, caught 8 catches for 83 yards, but no touchdowns. So you take a look at the stat lines for Justin Herbert. Like, you can tell he's been playing really good football. And as far as the Titans, you look at the Titans, Ryan Tannehill threw for 20 for 24, 246 yards and a touchdown to Westbrook Akine. And Derrick Henry had a rushing touchdown, had 25 carries and 80 yards for that one. And Ryan Tannehill had one carry for 12 yards, and he rushed in for a touchdown. So you take a look at the stat line right here. So the Titans, as bad as their offense played against the Saints last week and how they excelled this week, just goes to show you that the Chargers defense is a problem. Maybe not so much like in terms of talent mode, but coaching. It comes from a coaching perspective here, okay? The coach of Brian Staley, who's supposed to be a defensive minded coach, is not a very good manager when it comes to defense. I thought this is the second week in a row where he played very soft coverage, allowed so many yardage against a team that does not have any kind of offense at all, and they still found a way to lose. And their offense, who's been consistent, they've been very good, and even without Austin Eckler in this game, they still were able to put up project nice numbers for the most part. But their defense sold on them yet again. They gave up some touchdowns to the Titans, which they struggled to even score a touchdown last week. And this week they were able to muster in 3 touchdowns and a field goal, or 2 field goals, really, because that last one got them the win in overtime. Justin Herbert, again, as well as he's been playing, his defense has been selling on him. Their stat line, when you take a look at their stat line and how much they were able to throw the ball and everything like that, like you realize that he's not the problem of why this team lost. So you take a look at the total yardage for the Chargers. It was 342 yards. So they beat the Titans by a yard in total offense, right there. And then when you take a look at third down and everything like that, like the Chargers had 4 penalties, the Titans had 7 penalties. The Chargers gave up 3 sacks while the Titans gave up 5. And then time of possession was mostly thrown for, was more on the Titans' favor side of things, but they were 2 for 14 on third down efficiency. And when they went on fourth down, they were perfect for 3 for 3. So, the Titans won in a lot of different ways. They converted more first downs. They converted more third downs. They gave up more sacks. They punted less. They had more penalties, and they still found a way to win. I think that's just absolutely crazy. And no turnovers in this game either. So this is the second week in a row where the Chargers have not turned the ball over, and they are still 0-2. So Does this mean that it's time to fire Brandon Staley? Absolutely. I think if you lose two of those games that you had won, and you're losing them in like the last closing seconds, and then you're going in and you're starting out 0-2, and that carries from the Jacksonville loss from last year. Your coaching staff is the problem, not your players, because your players have there are so much good talent on this team that if there were other coaches, like if Sean Payton were to cover this team, I think he would have more luck than he is with the Broncos right now. Because I feel that his offensive mindedness of how he could have relate to Justin Herbert, and he could have exploded on that, and then you could build up around that defense which he's had when he was with the Saints. So, you know, why they didn't fire why they didn't fire Brandon Staley from last year is beyond me. But right now, you got to take a look at Brandon Staley as being on the hot seat. This could be his final year with the Chargers. They could potentially fire him during the season if he's not winning any games. But I don't know. The Chargers organization, they're very dysfunctional. They don't like to do things off the cuff like that. So we'll see how it goes. But I don't expect Brandon Staley to really be lasting with the Chargers much longer. So we'll get around to the 4 o'clock games here. So the Rams and the 49ers. So I didn't get to watch too much of this game. I didn't really get a chance to really analyze or see any good plays or anything like that. But the Rams lost this game by 7. And the reason why they lost by 7 is because McVay decided to go for that field goal with no time left, and to kind of cover the spread. So they kind of knew that they weren't going to win this game. And Shanahan still owns McVay. But I think the Rams are a lot better than what people are giving them credit for, including myself. Like, I don't think they're a great team, but they're competitive, which is something that they weren't really able to say last year. They were pretty horrendous last year. They played well against the 49ers. They scored some points. They scored 23 points on them. Matthew Stafford's been playing really well. The offensive line has been making some big plays, and then receivers are stepping up to the plate without Cooper Kupp. That's also something that, we didn't think was going to happen. So, the team itself has been playing really well. The Niners also had another really solid game for Brock Purdy. Kind of fell apart in the second half, but the first half was good enough for them to be able to pull away with the win here. But I don't want to say too much about this game because I didn't really get to watch it enough. But to this date right now, Shanahan still owns McVay. And now we want to talk about this this game right here, this matchup. Um, yeah, the Giants are. I have no idea what this team is right now. How do you lose, or how are you almost going to lose to a team that is trying to fight for the number one draft pick in next year's draft, 20-0? Like, I'm sorry, but that first half was absolutely dreadful by Daniel Jones, the offense, the defense, like every aspect. They were getting their butts handed to them in every phase of the game in that first half. Like, the Giants could not do anything. Arizona's defense, I gotta say, could be better than what we thought they were. They really could be a lot better than what we give them credit for. But as far as the game goes and everything like that, the Giants down 20-0 at halftime. Then they come back and then they find a way to win. I think it was kind of more of like the Cardinals giving up the game than it really was the Giants winning that game. So, like, big key crucial moments in this game where they came into the Giants' hands, which, they had a lot of big breaks in this game. But we can't sit here and say that the Giants played a very well game. Like, the second half was good. Like, they played a good second half. They adjusted a lot of different things to the offense. Brian Dable started to call better plays. Wink Martindale was able to get this defense to wake up and smell the coffee and play football. Saquon got at least 2 touchdowns in this game. Daniel Jones rushed in for a touchdown. And I think Isaiah Hodgins or somebody in the receiving end also was able to catch a touchdown pass from Daniel Jones. So the game looked absolutely dead in the water. And I kind of started to turn it off a little bit because I just was not really entertained with the way, and just knowing how pathetic the Giants looked in that first half. like, yeah, granted, it's one thing to lose to the Cowboys when, their pass rush is the best in the NFL. But when you go in here and you're playing a team that is supposed to be the worst in roster play and everything, and you're down 20 to nothing, that's pretty pathetic. And it's also very concerning too about how the Giants season is going to go this year. So Saquon is injured right now. He left the game after that, which kind of hurt me in fantasy football in a lot of ways. Um, Not really happy about that. But the Giants were able to kick a game-winning field goal, and they won that game, 31-28. So it was probably the worst Giants game, one of the worst Giants games I've watched this year so far, besides last week's in week 1. But yeah, this game was just absolutely pathetic. And honestly, if anything, the Giants should have lost that game along with the Cardinals because of just how bad they played in that first half. So for them to be 1-1 is an absolute miracle. And excuse me, and it's a historical comeback for the G-men. But that game was just absolutely pathetic. All right, next game, the Jets and the Cowboys game. So again, didn't watch this one too much. If Aaron Rodgers were to have played in this game, probably could have been a little bit better, probably just a tiny bit better. But the fact of the matter is that this game wasn't even close from the beginning. The pass rush got to the Jets' offensive line, which we know is not very good. They got turnovers from Zach Wilson, at least 3 of them. Fumble recoveries. Breece Hall, struggled in this game to get anything going. The same with Dalvin Cook. Garrett Wilson had some moments in this game. I believe he also caught he did catch a touchdown pass from Zach Wilson. But that was really it, really. I mean, 30-10, this also was another very pathetic game for the Jets. But I also do feel bad for the Jets because they don't have Aaron Rodgers for the remaining of the year. So, in terms of how quarterback play is going to go this year, they're probably going to sign a quarterback for cheap. I think if I were the Jets, like obviously you want to fix up that offensive line because it's pretty bad. But if you're going to look for a quarterback, like I think one of your best available options to get right now is probably Carson Wentz, even though he hasn't been very good in a while, or someone that's still in the league. Like there's a couple good valuable backups. Like I could see the Jets working out in a trade or picking up in free agency. Like I could see Carson Wentz being one. Andy Dalton could be one right now, with him being in Carolina. But I don't know how they're going to feel about that because he's being a mentor to Bryce Young right now, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So, and Jacoby Brissett could be one too from Washington because Sam Howell's playing. So there are some interesting quarterback signings that they could go with to kind of fulfill and help out in Zach Wilson. If Zach Wilson struggles, like these quarterbacks can come in here and kind of show him how it gets done and everything. And if they did that, they could sneak their way into the playoffs. But I think as long as Zach Wilson is the quarterback, I don't think they're making the playoffs. I just don't see that because I don't see anything that's like really exciting or anything that's improved from Zach Wilson that shows me that he is playoff ready. I just don't see it as a playoff quarterback. So the Cowboys defense, they're probably the best pass rush in the league right now. Their offense is also pretty, I thought they played a better offense than they did last week, against the Giants because the defense did pretty much all the work to get them that 40-0 win. But yeah, I mean, this game was also not very good in a lot of different manners. And I think the Cowboys defense could probably be the next 85 Bears if they continue to play the way that they are. I'll kind of fast forward a couple there. All right, this game, I'm not going to say too much about it. I didn't really get a chance to watch it, but Sean Payton with the Broncos, 0-2. Does that really shock you? Not really, because I feel like they're also a team that's also not very good. Russell Wilson, hasn't really done anything different since Sean Payton's arrival here. But you take a look at the Commanders, and I feel that, right now they're 2-0. I mean, they didn't beat any great teams. Like, they beat the Cardinals, and they now have beaten the Broncos for them to be 2-0. So I don't know what the Commanders are going to be like this year. I just really don't. but they could be a lot more competitive than what we thought they were. And they could win a lot more games than what we thought they were, and could also sneak into the playoffs than we thought they would have. So they kind of do impress me in a way. I think their offense is a lot more efficient. I feel like they're also more equipped of what they are. You have some sneaky players in there like Terry McLaurin, you have Jahan Dotson, a pretty good offensive line. The run game, Brian Robinson does good in, but as far as Antonio Gibson does, I think Brian Robinson kind of takes the bulk of the carries now, and I think he will be moving forward. Um, but they have a pretty decent team. And I think Sam Howell is the guy that can play, but we just also have to wait and see like as far as how they're going to match up when they have to play teams in like the NFC East. So like the Giants, who they usually lose to every year, or the Cowboys, or the Eagles, who they usually beat at least once every year. So you know, as long as they find ways to win some of these games in their own division, they could sneak into the playoffs. They could be a complete wild card for all we know. I mean, who really knows how Sam Howell's going to play the rest of the year? But as far as the Broncos go, I think Russell Wilson is just not in it anymore. I think his football days are long past him, and I think their offense also has a lot of questions and are dealing with a lot of different injuries right now. So the way that this game was played here, the Broncos were up 21-3. They kind of blew it at the end there. Although, a very impressive throw by Russell Wilson got them into the end zone on the last offensive snap of the game before going for that 2-point conversion. That would have tied up the game, and therefore the Commanders sealed the deal and were able to stop that 2-point conversion, which would have made everything a lot more interesting. So I'm really not impressed with the Broncos, and I think the Broncos are a team that I think is going to struggle yet again this year. Maybe their offense isn't as dead in the water as they were a year ago, but with the concerns that I do have for them in Russell Wilson, in their money situation, in their offense situation, and all of that nature right there. I don't know if this team is really built to go ahead and beat like the Chiefs or the Chargers or anything like that. Oh, they do beat the Chargers at least once, but the tough teams, like I just don't think they're a playoff ready team yet. I really don't. All right, next game we got the Patriots and the Dolphins. So this was a Sunday night game that I actually was able to watch from start to finish. And this game was a pretty good game. Like, you know, you take a look at the Dolphins. The Dolphins played a nice game. I thought they played fairly well. Not, a great football game because we kind of figured that they would have, eventually struggled. We knew they were going to, I think this was going to be a much more tougher matchup. I think they understood all of that. But I think for the most part, when they got like the explosive plays that they needed to get, they executed and they did very well in. However, there were some times of like where Tua threw the ball to the interception, you know, and then Christian Gonzalez from the Patriots was dialing up over there and was able to pull off some like really big game, some really big moments there too, where the ball was knocked out of Tyreek Hill's hands. So I thought their defense had a pretty solid game plan. But what really lost the Patriots this game was their first half turnover. So, if they didn't fumble the ball early in the first quarter or second quarter of that matter, and if Mac doesn't throw that interception, the Patriots could have won this game by a score of like, 20-17. That's how close this game really was. So, you can't really blame the offense for losing this game. Well, you can blame the offense because they're not playing very well. But defense also had a sluggish start in the beginning, but they were able to adjust themselves well as the second half came in. So, 17-3 at halftime, and gave up a couple of big touchdowns to Tyreek and Raheem Mostert. You're only able to muster through a field goal as well if you're the Patriots. So you have to make some defensive decisions and some adjustments there. But in that second half, Mac Jones and the offense came alive, and the players that Mac Jones feels most comfortable with, as you can probably see, Hunter Henry was one that he really enjoys throwing the ball to. Devontae Parker was a big part of it. Kendrick Bourne, who should have been more involved last year, was also involved quite a bit. Juju, I don't know really so much about Juju. I thought he would have been, maybe not necessarily that number one guy, but at least someone that could have been productive in Bill Belichick's offense. And their defense has played really, really solid too, which we knew that their defense was going to be really good dating back to when we were talking about this game, months prior. Like, we knew how good their defense was going to be, and we knew that they were going to keep themselves in the game. So the Patriots had a lot of missed opportunities. They turned the ball over too many times. That cost them another game for the second week in a row. So that's just a very blatant, obvious thing that we saw. But you can't really blame Mac Jones for the way that he played. I thought he played a very nice, solid game for most of the game. He threw an interception. That was not a very good throw right there by him. That went right to Xavier Howard, who's given the Patriots problems over the years, the last several seasons at least, and that's also not very good there too. But you can't blame Mac for everything. I thought Mac had some really good decision making. He, when he had the time to throw the ball, he would throw the ball deep down the field and make some plays with his feet. But the offensive line continues to be a big question. The receiving core is also a big question too. If they would have had DeAndre Hopkins, if they would have signed DeAndre Hopkins to a cheaper deal, if Hopkins was more willing to do that, I don't think they would have had as many issues as they are having right now without like that true number one receiver on their team. And their run game is also not very explosive either. Like Ramondre Stevenson probably had a better second half, and Zeke Elliott is kind of just Zeke Elliott. He's just there as like the goal line stand. But yeah, this team has a lot of things to really work on, and their offense needs to work on a lot of things. But give them credit where credit is due. They kept themselves in this game for all of the entire game, and that's really impressive to do with a very explosive and fast offense that Miami has. Like, that's really, really impressive. Now, the one play I do want to talk about, which I know a lot of people did say, so it was a bit of a weird call on that 4th and short. Mac Jones threw that ball to Mike Gesicki. They didn't quite convert the first down, but then, you go for it on 4th down, you have to. Mike Gesicki threw the ball to Mike Gesicki in the flat. Gesicki was not able to convert on the 4th down, which the right call was to pitch the ball back. Cole Strange, one of their right tackle, was able to catch the ball and actually did a pretty good job running, except that he was not able to make it to the first down marker, which is what you can see right here too. So they initially ruled this as a first down, whereas then the film kind of showed that he wasn't because his knee was touching the ground before he hit the first down marker. All that stuff to me is like, I don't know why they would measure where his knee lands versus where the ball is. I just never understood that rule. But regardless, it was overturned and the game ends right there. So if those small things didn't happen like last week, they threw the ball. Mac Jones threw it on a 4th down play to Cutie, I think his name is Cutie, or Booty, whatever his name is there too, who could have had a first down there too, but didn't land his feet in. If he would have landed that feet in and they would have been able to score points on that play, they would have won that game. Same here. If Mike Gesicki would have been able to run that first down, or if Cole Strange would have had just an inch left in him to convert on that play right there, they could have had another chance to win, and they could have won. I think they would have won this game. So the Patriots play a lot of these games from behind because they have to make up from what their turnovers are. And that just can't continue to happen in this league. I mean, if you're talking a playoff team, if you're talking dark horse and Super Bowls and everything, you have to overcome yourself. You can't give up like these big time turnover plays that are going to cost your team a game. Now you're already starting 0-2. You play the Jets next week. You're very fortunate that Aaron Rodgers is not playing in this game. Otherwise, this would have been a big issue for the Patriots if they were to have had Aaron Rodgers playing that game, and they probably would have started that game possibly 0-3. So, they're very fortunate that Aaron Rodgers is not playing for the Jets and it's Zach Wilson. So that gives them a lot more of a lenient room there. And it's a game that they could potentially win because Bill Belichick always owns the Jets every single year. The Dolphins have to play the Broncos, another winnable game for them right there. They could also go to 3-0 and be on top of the AFC East. So both teams have some really big games coming into next week. So the Patriots need to figure out their turnovers. They need to stop turning the ball over against a very good Jets defense, which will probably be, well, so far will be their best defense that they are facing this year. And the Dolphins have to get themselves to a fast start and utilize the run game a lot, because they utilized the run game a lot on Sunday night, and it worked out in their favor, and they ended up winning that game. So I thought the Dolphins ran the ball quite well with Raheem Mostert, and I think they should continue to do that because I think Mostert can get some of those big plays in. Two more games left, and they're the Monday night games. Not a whole lot to say about these last two games here. The Panthers and the Saints. We knew this was going to be a low scoring, kind of ugly kind of a game. The Panthers continue to struggle with Bryce Young. He struggles yet again. The offensive line's just not very good, and they weren't good at all in this entire game. They put a lot of pressure on Young. Demario Davis kept going after him, and Marshawn Lattimore also as well. So the Saints defense looked electrifying. Like, I feel like their defense kind of was very similar to the way that how they used to play Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, is what I felt like. I thought Bryce Young struggled to play against this really tough defense of the Saints. Couldn't get anything going, couldn't get the ground game going with Miles Sanders, and they struggled yet again. So they were able to muster a touchdown at the end of the game, but just was not enough in this game. They had to do a lot more. The Saints offense, in my personal opinion, did also not play any better than what we saw from the Panthers either. I thought Derek Carr had a very flat game. He was under pressure for quite a bit of the game as well. Their run game was also not the greatest either. It was okay, but not exactly the greatest. Derek Carr made some mistakes. He threw that interception again, like he did last week. Chris Olave had a pretty good game, but their receiving core is very good. So I think Derek Carr has a lot more help than he's ever had before, and can rely on defenses to win, which he's never had a very good defense before. That really helped a lot. And but at the same time though too, I feel like he's so reliant on the defense that he doesn't have to win like these big shootout games. Like, if he were to have played still with the Raiders and he was playing against the Panthers, I guarantee you that game would have been somewhat of a shootout because of how bad their defense has been with him under center there. So yeah. So the Saints are good, not great, but I think their offense also has a lot of questions too. I don't really necessarily trust all of their offense yet. I think there's a lot to really be said about their offense. Same with the Panthers. I feel like they're both very similar teams. They want to play the hardcore old school run game and play the old school defensive low scoring games, but if you're trying to compete with the league and you're trying to compete for a division title, you got to be able to play offense. So, both offenses struggled in this game. Bryce Young, learning from his experiences, and this is only going to help him get better, throughout the year. And then the last game, the Steelers and the Browns. So the Browns, unfortunately, lost Nick Chubb, who's going to potentially be out for the rest of the season, and a possible Watson suspension. So earlier today, they said that there was not going to be any consequences about the way Deshaun Watson acted during this particular game, but I believe that it could be somewhat in the talks eventually. Deshaun Watson played like he did against the Browns last week. He didn't really need to really do a whole lot. Made a lot of crucial mistakes, threw that first pick six to Highsmith for the touchdown early in the game. Turned the ball over, fumbled the ball, was missing receivers left and right, and was just completely inaccurate. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know, as far as Nick Chubb goes, we know he's probably going to be out for the rest of the year. Jerome Ford, they're going to have to probably pick up a running back here, which could be the potential, the possibility that they could be picking up Kareem Hunt again, which I think would help him out a lot, considering he is familiar with this team already, and he has good chemistry with the offense and the offensive line and can build trust in them. But their running game is just not going to be the essentially they're not going to be the same as what they were under Chubb, which is going to hurt them a lot. So Deshaun's going to have to play a lot of hero ball. He's going to probably have to play a lot of come from behind. He's going to have to play a lot of passing the ball, and he's going to have to trust his receivers to be able to catch the ball, and he's going to have to be accurate with the football. Um, the Steelers, I don't want to really hype up on the Steelers either. I know their defense really won them this game. Their offense was also not all that much better. Just being honest, they also struggled against a good Browns defense. Um, but the Steelers essentially won this game because of their turnovers. So if Deshaun Watson didn't throw that pick six, or Deshaun Watson didn't fumble that ball and they return it for a touchdown, like the Browns would have found a way to win this game if any of those things never happened. But the fact of the matter is, it did. And Deshaun Watson, as far as his suspension goes, for those who are not familiar with his suspension already, what's something that could happen or face at least a punishment for it. So video kind of shows it. I'm not going to show the video just because it's copyright infringement and I don't want to get in trouble with the NFL or anything like that. But essentially, when you look at the film, it looked like Deshaun Watson shoved the ref out of the way. So it looked like there was a call that happened that Deshaun did not like, and Deshaun was arguing with the ref. The ref got in his way, and he kind of put his hands on him to kind of move him out of the way to continue on the argument where like his teammates were kind of just backing him away. Now as far as like how other teams would have handled this, if any other player were to have played in that kind of environment and they were very hostile like that, I feel like they would have been thrown out immediately. But the refs of this game decided that they didn't really want to, they didn't really need to eject him, although they probably should have. I think anytime you put any contact on a ref, I think you should automatically be ejected from the game. But they didn't feel like that, so he ended up still playing, and that gave the Browns a chance. So as far as facing any possible suspensions, who knows? They could decide something on that later. Or it could be something that could fall into next year. I don't know. But I think regardless though, I don't rules are the rules. If you can't put your hand on the official, something needs to be done about it. So that's all I'm really gonna say on that. I'm not gonna say if it was either right or wrong that he did that. But the video clearly shows that he did put his hands on the referee, and therefore something needs to be done about it. So that's just my opinion on that. But the Steelers, as long as they can continue to play good defense, if Kenny Pickett does not turn the ball over like he's been lately, and the offense doesn't struggle the way that they have been, they could potentially dethrone the Browns as far as like upper echelon of the AFC North teams. Like if the Browns struggle without Nick Chubb, and they struggle not having Nick Chubb on the field, or Deshaun Watson does serve some suspension time with putting his hands on the ref like that and ejections and everything, like this team could fall apart. And it's a shame because I feel like they shouldn't fall apart, because I think they worked their butts off way too much, and I think they're a dark horse that could do something this year. They've got a lot of talent that people don't really know about. And with all that being said, everybody, that concludes my week 2 recap, all my thoughts about all the games in week 2. I'm sorry again I didn't get into too much detail about them, but I didn't watch enough games to really analyze on every single one, so I kind of just wanted to brief it up a little bit to kind of give you like certain parts of the game that I was able to see, and the scores and everything like that, and what stats say. So that's just really what I wanted to do about that. So leave a comment down below, like this video if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, let me know what you guys think. This is your boy JP Football Fanatic saying thanks. We'll see you all tomorrow night when I do my week 3 picks. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much.